This is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Brueski, Stacey Cole, and Todd Michaels.
You know what I'm saying? One piece that I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about Stacey's thoughts and my thoughts on how that relationship was going, I had forgotten that in the documentary, her friend was also getting married. And she was talking about how she was sharing all of her planning with Ellen and so excited. And Ellen wanted nothing to do with sharing her plans for her wedding. She wouldn't talk about it, didn't want to, which to me just adds another layer of, I'm not happy in this situation. This is not really what I want.
I want out.
I mean, that would certainly be a sign that you're not in a great place. If you're not, you wouldn't want to do that. You wouldn't want to talk about that. Some friends, they kept in contact with Sam. Some of even the family did for a bit. Had civil, cordial conversations. Even joked back and forth a little bit how they miss her and all that. And then you get that one question: do you think I killed her? And then you get kind of the silence that goes on, and the answer is, well, we don't think that it was a suicide. So. Again, it's hard to examine the behavior or figure out what the person is thinking behind that question. But is that a question of someone who would have done this? I mean, or is it more like I'm really trying to gauge the room on this? Because look, beyond what happened here and what we know about Sammy, he doesn't seem like some sort of vengeful, murderous type. So that plays into his favor.
Right. And this, with the number of stab wounds, the deep wound to the chest with the knife embedded like that, this is somebody, you would think, somebody that could do this to someone that they love or have been so intimately connected to. This would be someone you would expect to see more aberrant behavior from than what we know about him.
Yeah, it doesn't. None of it plays to the characters of that we want to assign to this. Yeah. To try and make this make sense. In your experience, let me ask you this: how often do you think that there are suicide rulings that are put out there when they shouldn't be, because of a lack of understanding of mental health? When someone just simply says, well, they had mental health problems. How quick is that where you get the medical examiner or you get the investigators to sign off on suicide just because those words are spoken without a whole lot of investigation into what that actually means?
Boy, that is a good question, but that's not one that I don't normally interface with medical examiners and the whole legal end of it. So I don't have an answer to that. I'll just share something personal because it's in my book, which is out in the public. I had a husband suicide by hanging. And I knew that I would be looked at, and I was. And so when I made the 911 call and the house was swarming with police and a detective and the whole team, and they went over every room in the house, and I knew I was sequestered in my bedroom for about 4 or 5 hours with a circle of cops surrounding me, watching everything I was doing, listening to every phone call I made. And I accepted that because I knew, well, they're going to want to make sure that I knew it was a suicide, but they wanted to make, did I do something? Did I, obviously I couldn't lift the guy's body up and do this. But it's just something that in a normal circumstance, you roll with. They are going to look at everything, and they are going to look at the spouse or partner. And so how many times do they not look closely? I don't know. But I think most of the time they do look pretty closely and go into mental health history. And I have worked in community mental health, and when there was a murder, or sometimes there were murders by some of our clients, and certainly there were suicides, and it did get looked at very closely. So.
And with something like this, you want to get to the answer. You want to figure out what the heck's going on. When you were in that situation, Shavaun, was it going through your mind of, okay, they're watching me now to, I'm just curious, like what sort of state were you in that moment? Because you just walked into that horrific scene, and now the worst possible thing is going to run through your mind of, well, I have to, they're going to look at me naturally, but I know it wasn't me, obviously. But did you feel like you had to convince them it wasn't you? Or did you just feel like just being me is going to be enough, and then they can glean what they're going to glean off of it, which is the truth?
It's a really good question, because it never popped into my mind that they would find anything to actually look at me. I knew that this is just standard procedure, that they are going to watch the partner. They are going to question the partner very closely. They are going to look around the house. And I was rolling with that. I was crying and obviously hysterical, and I had to make phone calls to friends and my kids and break the news. And so very distraught. And that went on for, several weeks. But as far as worrying about them looking at me, I never worried. It's like I just rolled with it. I said, of course they're going to, but they're not going to find anything. Obviously he wasn't murdered, and obviously I didn't have anything to do with it. So
somebody is bringing up the term covert narcissist in the chat, and in no way can we diagnose Sam, or are we diagnosing? I want to speak more just in general terms about that sort of behavior, where some would be, on the surface, everything looks lovely, everything looks great, but on the back end, things are not. There seems to be, there's controlling behavior that goes on. Let's speak to that a little bit in situations like this. I'm not necessarily speaking of this one specifically, but how that would be demonstrated in a situation where there's something that happens between the couple, but on the surface everything looks great. I mean, including to one of the partners, maybe.
That's an interesting question. And if we're talking about narcissistic personality types, they're not known for horrendous acts of violence and murder. That's more getting into psychopathy or person with sadistic tendencies. And usually you would see more of a history of violence in some way. Is it possible, again, that there could be a hidden covert personality disorder of some kind? Sure, that's possible. But you would generally hear, and again, how closely was this looked at? You would hear from other people that the guy had some anger problems that came up when he was challenged or rejected, fired from jobs, that he would explode. And so it isn't clear in this situation that this guy had a personality disorder that would fit for committing this kind of, because this really seems like a rage killing, to stab someone in the heart like that. I mean, this is beyond a typical domestic abuse case where somebody may push or shove or even punch. That kind of thing would be more common. And then that gets into the fact that she had bruising. And that's a hard one, because, if you work around little kids all the time as an elementary school teacher and you're playing sports or anything like that, you can be bruised. And, so it's, and one would like to think that she had, if there was really extreme domestic violence going on that would lead up to something like this, she had friends. One would think that this would leak out somehow, that she would have disclosed something to people.
And she apparently talked quite a bit about being unhappy at work, wanting to quit. This was not kind of, like this teaching thing's not what she, thought it was going to be cracked up to be, basically. And I never thought of that with the bruising. That's very true. My girlfriend is a teacher, and I get, texts all the time. It's like, well, this kid hit me today. I mean, the stuff that they put up with is really, and it's elementary. it's kind of crazy. I've seen some bruises, from that. I mean, and it can look like, somebody's hitting her.
Yeah.
Because someone did, a child. So I'd be curious as to the location of the bruising.
Right.
And all of that. That would certainly tell a story. But again, it's one of those things where on the surface, it doesn't always necessarily mean what we think it does. And that's why it's important to look at all the angles of that. Her friends were talking about how she had been withdrawn, very, not seeming to be herself. We're talking about the wedding planning and that she didn't really seem very anxious to do that or really want to do much of that or share much of it with anybody, because apparently probably just a lot of it wasn't actually taking place. At that moment in time, certainly not. You're not in a great place if this is where things are at that moment in time. But again, I'm trying to go back to any sort of evidence, any sort of piece of the puzzle that helps us understand where Ellen was at or where she was going at that moment in time, not being able to open up to her friends about what was going on, because apparently, according to them, we've heard nothing about the bruising other than from the examination of her body. People do, especially if this was kind of a sudden shift, and it sounds like it was in the last month or so of her life. How often are people opening up right away if abuse like that comes up in a relationship? A little bit later in, not necessarily right away, but it starts happening. Maybe you're kind of taken aback. Maybe it's something you've never really experienced. Are people very quick to start talking about this with others? Or sometimes is it, I'm going to keep this under wraps. Hopefully it gets better.
Yeah.
They're going to hide it.
Yeah. Often they hide it and they blame themselves for it. Yeah. And it could have been that just speculating, when she began having a lot of stress, I'm going to say stress symptoms rather than mental illness or something like that, because I don't think there's no evidence that she had any kind of major mental illness. It sounds like a lady who was really stressed by her job. Did the stress cause some deterioration in the relationship because he couldn't handle her when she was stressed? Mm-hmm. And that was another, just looking at all possibilities here. Yeah. That her stress could have been a factor in a shift in the relationship. Not that she caused it, but that he really couldn't handle the change.
Yeah. How often is it that people, though, will, when asked, what's wrong? What's going on? And if the problem is really something over here, that the answer is, it's work.
Yeah.
Stress.
Especially with a relationship issue, Tony. I think that's a really big thing. She was a very happy, joyful spirit. Everybody described her as just, just a joy. You'd feel this enchantment when she walked into the room. And now she kind of had this dark aura about her. Something shifted, something changed. What was it? Was it just the job?
Or, a combination of two things, where maybe it's initiated in the job, and then the stress of the job then, however that is, doesn't mesh with the relationship, which causes more problems over there, and then it snowballs into kind of a combination of both. But you're not necessarily going to bare your soul to people right away when they're asking what's wrong, and go, well, see these bruises over here? Yeah, they're not from the kids. Mm-hmm. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But that people do tend to cover up reality pretty quick, especially when unexpected things come on, do they not?
And if you're used to presenting as having a high level of functioning and kind of an ideal life, people tend to want to keep up that image, and they have a hard time disclosing that things are not as perfect as I had been hoping and dreaming that they would be.
Well, she did have this fairy tale expectation of her life. She wanted to be married. She wanted to have the big wedding. She wanted just this fairy tale life. And it wasn't adding up. The job sucked. Who knows what was going on in their relationship? She was living her life as though it were Instagram, when really it was just like, I don't know, it wasn't adding up. It wasn't what she wanted. And I think there is probably a little bit of shame, like, I made this big stink that I was going to have this amazing future, and it's just not turning out this way.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like we do that a lot. Like a lot of young people have those expectations at that moment in time. And I don't know if it's good, bad, whatever it may be, but it's then we all get older and we all go through life and we look at the 20-somethings and go, you just wait.
No shit.
You just wait. Life will come for you. But when it comes back to the to all of that, to the work thing, to life, her parents, if your problem is work, why would you want to be moving back home?
Right. That was in my mind when I was thinking about the increasing tension at work caused tension in the relationship. Yeah. And I just want to go back where I feel comforted and safe, and mom and dad are my resource. Yeah.
Our chat people are being profound again. I love it. They're so insightful. Is it possible that Sam was having an affair and she found out and confronted him? I mean, anything's possible.
Anything's possible.
Anything's possible. But, could something have shifted in the relationship? Because he spent a lot of time away. I got to say, if you've got a traveling partner,
they must be cheating. No, it's not.
No, like I'm not saying that, but boy.
Stacey is letting her life bleed into the show a little bit.
Sorry, but I digress. Yeah. But seriously, if you've got a traveling partner, there needs to be a level of trust there. And I feel like in her text messages, I was identifying with her a little bit. Like, I'm seeing the anxiety. I'm recognizing it from experience, people.
But the anxiety doesn't always mean it's happening, though, either.
Correct. That is correct. But I just wonder if there was this trigger moment that
Which could be frustrating as shit for him, too. Not to say if you're being accused of cheating and you're not.
True.
That can create a ton of friction as well. I've been there. I've been there where
it's good. We've got both sides right here. It can go both ways.
Where just because someone thinks it's happening doesn't mean it's happening.
You're right.
And people can come up with all sorts of horrible things they tell themselves and end up believing them. And that could just snowball into a shit show. And then, yes, you can get very ingrained going because, yes, it does happen. It did happen to you. But it doesn't happen in every situation where someone is feeling that way. Feeling doesn't equal reality. So if we're trying to think of, could there have been tensions in the relationship because of this, because one's thinking this way and one's not really doing that? Yes, there could be a lot. And that's kind of where I get back to, as I said at the very beginning of the show, something blew up here that was unexpected. Mm-hmm. How it happened, why it happened, we don't know the answer to that. But something obviously did. And whether that was Ellen by herself performing the zombie suicide, or the zombie unaliving, I don't know, but it would be quite an insanely rare case if she actually did unalive herself.
Yep.
At the end of the day, I think that's.
It's just not physically possible. Unless she was a contortionist, which they never came out and said that she did. Yeah,
that's in the follow-up.
Well, I mean, even a contortionist, I'm not sure that they could get those stab wounds exactly that way.
Let's talk. I want to talk about the stab wounds because, we say 20 stab wounds and it sounds horrible and gruesome, and it is. Some of those are also not very deep.
Superficial.
They're superficial stab wounds where, they kind of tried and then didn't go very far. And again, I know the stats on death by stabbing yourself are insanely low. But can you speak to that at all, Shavaun, where, yes, 20 stab wounds, but only a handful were actually deep? Death by, again, it's not very common. So what do we have to go on to say that, well, maybe this is a sign that this was self-induced because of those ones that didn't go very far? Is that very indicative of someone stabbing someone else, that you're going to have a bunch of superficial wounds of a knife?
No, it's weird. It's just another weird case. And I was thinking, if you were doing that to yourself repeatedly, that hurts.
Yes, it does.
That hurts. And that's generally why women choose to overdose, right? We are not wired to do things repeatedly that really, really hurt. And, I would think if somebody did it once, it would be, ow, I'm not going to do it this way. I've got other choices here, other options here.
Yeah, because their hesitation.
Don't forget, I'm going to do this, versus this.
Right.
So, and for those of you just listening, I was motioning to the stab wounds to the back of her head and neck. You're not going to do that.
Yeah.
I don't care how far you are on being mentally ill, you're not going to do it that way.
Right.
You're just not.
And flailing around. I mean, and the head cut too. I don't get either. That's a weird one.
And the other interesting piece, as we try to look at all sides, is the internet searches about wasn't one painless ways to do it.
Well, yeah, but there's an issue with that. The computer, the data file that they're looking at on there, changed. Like the investigator. None of that. He provided the file, and then the person who gets the file, the image of the computer, suddenly these things are there, and they're not on the original copy that was sent over. So
another weird piece.
Exactly.
Another weird piece. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, at the end of the day, if we just had some answers, if we just had some questioning, and maybe this could all be explained, and all these years later now, Sam's name wouldn't be being brought up the way it is, like this documentary has brought it up. But I feel like some of these questions have to be answered.
They do.
And explained away. Otherwise, nothing makes sense in this case. And if at the end of the day they can be answered and it shows that, Sam has nothing to do with this, great. I hope he does have nothing to do with this. I hope this is the craziest case and something really remotely, nearly impossible took place here. Or she was murdered by somebody. But who was it? I mean,
this is where I channel Stephen King, and it was this malevolent force that came in through the heating vent or something and materialized. And
something.
Selena Gomez and Steve Martin and Martin Short need to get on this one.
Yeah. Of course, again, we're not saying that Sam did this. We're just speculating based on the information that's now come out since that documentary. Murder in Apartment 603 or 601 or Death in Apartment 603, rather. Sam Goldberg, Ellen Greenberg's fiancé, at the time of her death, has never been charged with any crime in connection to the case. He has consistently maintained that Ellen's death was a suicide, and all individuals mentioned here are presumed innocent unless proven otherwise. But the questions are going to be asked, and answers need to be found. We'll keep asking them. Be sure to press subscribe wherever you're watching this or listening to this so you don't miss any of those questions that we're going to keep asking in this case. And let us know your thoughts in the comment section as well. And check out Shavaun's book, Nightbird. You can hear her story in great detail. It's a very good read. Please do check it out wherever books are sold. Until next time, for Shavaun, for Stacy, for Todd, I'm Tony Brueski. Thanks for watching. We'll talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast. Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.